Welcome to the story of Millie Salmon and the Infinite Shop. This is Chapter 16, Mom at Work. Dad got a chance to show Millie what the shop can do. Now it's Mom's turn. I'm the author, Ray Dubicki, happy to read this story to you. Millie's about to see that she was right about wanting to visit Dalla Brateur. You can join Millie Salmon on Patreon or find more at milliesalmon.com. And you can follow this podcast and other stories on social media at Infinite Shop Limited. Chapter 16, Mom at Work. It was a hard morning to wake up. The sky was dark at the edges and the windows had fogged up overnight. You could feel the low clouds scraping over the tops of the buildings and making the trees of the park shake as they brushed by. Millie tempted sticking a bare toe out from under the covers. The air was clammy. Her room creaked with the knowledge that it was still too early in the morning. She could hear Dad moving around the kitchen. Mom was in the shower, creating her own clouds from the gap under the bathroom door. They lowered the ceiling just that much more and filled the apartment with wet soap smell. She pulled back under the covers and curled up into a ball with only her face showing. She forced her eyes to close slowly. She pulled her awake from the front of her brain into the back, tricking it into an unmarked closet and slamming the door behind. Pleased that she tricked herself back asleep, Millie turned her attention to realizing that she was now completely awake. "Stupid brain," she muttered. The floor was, as expected, uncomfortably cold as she resigned to getting up and searching out a pair of slippers. In the kitchen, Dad had 3 pots boiling on the stove, the microwave going at full blast, the coffee pot working through its routine, and was pulling something out of the oven. He put the large glass pan on a trivet and shook off the oven mitt. "Good morning," he chirped. Millie pushed a bar stool aside, debating the risk of sitting at the counter. "You didn't expect something silly like a sandwich for lunch today, did you?" She sized up the pot some more. "What's on the menu?" "Boiled beets, 12-bean porridge, and pickled herring." He smiled. "Please, no." He continued to smile. "Actually, you have a turkey sandwich and a pile of fruit. Your lunchbox is in the fridge." She trusted him enough to walk over to the fridge and unzip the lunchbox therein, which was indeed full of a turkey sandwich, a granola bar, and several different fruits. "You are a mean, mean person, Dad." He continued to grin. Millie put the lunchbox back in the fridge. "What's all of this?" She waved at the cauldron factory like she was polishing it. "All this activity for?" "Those 2 are boiling jars." He pointed to the tallest, burbliest pots. "I'm helping Mrs. Pitters can all the winter vegetables she bought at the market yesterday." He waved over 3 large bowls of cut greens and potatoes. "She'll be over in an hour. The other pot is the first round of stuff going in the jars." The smaller pot had some dribbling red sauce moving down its side. "But you're off the hook. We have eggy casserole for breakfast. Do you think you'll survive?" "Good stuff." She took her position at the counter, and Dad cut a square from the pan that had just come out of the oven. She responded by diving her fork through the large corner piece and shoving pretty much the whole thing in her mouth. "Really good stuff," she huffed through a too-hot bite. She polished it off the rest while checking her phone. Reggie was up, awake, and texting enough to get a shut up from Pats. Dad pulled glass jars out of the pots and lined them, steaming in rows on towels covering the kitchen table. Millie excused herself and went to her room to get dressed. She passed Mom, already in a suit and heels, in the hallway. Dad started in with the boiled beet routine for her. When Millie came out of her room, dressed and ready, Mom was pulling her napkin out of her shirt and finishing off a cup of coffee. Dad kissed them both, and they went down the stairs together. "Have a good day at school, honey. I have to get a book from Grandpa before going into work." She kissed Millie on the head and turned the other direction toward the shop. Millie was sure this was a lie. Millie watched her go 3 steps, each clicking on the sidewalk. The last was the loudest, because all the forward movement went into that loud click of heel on pavement, and Mom pivoted and looked at Millie. "I don't have to tell you that anymore, do I?" "Nope." "What do you have to do at school today?" Mom asked. It was a weird enough question that Millie could not lie. "Nothing in language arts or history. Math, they're still on fractions again. We have a long-term sub back in gym." "Do you have any projects due or tests?" "I'm almost finished my group reading book. We have thinking questions due on Friday." "You'll have a few minutes to read later today." Mom put her hand out for Millie to follow the same time she flipped out her phone. Millie skipped to catch up, and they started walking to the shop together. Into the phone, Mom said, "Hi, this is Mrs. Salmon, Millie Salmon's mom." It was Mom's official voice. "We had some family that got laid over on a delayed flight, and we are still sitting on the highway to get to the airport. Yes, it would be difficult for Millie to make it to school on time. Oh, you saw the backup on the news. I'm sure we can be seen from space right now. I think we will take it easy, but we had to get out there at the crack of dawn, so it may just be a restful day for everyone. Thank you. Yes, she will be back in tomorrow." The phone went back in her bag. Millie was quite astounded that such a strange lie would work. If you're going to lie, give them something they already believe, and people believe quite astounding things. They took 3 paces before Mom followed up. "Also, don't lie." They turned the corner and went into the shop. "Good morning, Grandpa," Mom said. "Good morning." His greeting cut short. He smiled at Millie. "It's about time. Some adventure today." "It's bring your daughter to work day." "And Dad will find out when?" "I'll message him in an hour or so." They turned back to the door. Mom took out a key and turned the knob. For the first time since walking Dalen to the cab in the late evening months ago, Millie looked out of the shop on Dalla Brateur. Its beauty had not dimmed in her memory. Now it was even brighter because it was the first time she saw it in the day. She had played this moment in her mind repeatedly, her triumphant return to this jewel of a city. Mom let the moment last for a second, enjoying her daughter's awe. "You ready to do this, right? There's enough interesting things to do here that we don't need to hop between worlds." "Nice. I'm ready," Millie replied. "Good." They stepped out of the shop. Millie kept pace with her mother for 5 steps before having to skip and reset. This was forceful mom walk, not the weekend market saunter Millie normally got to experience. It took Millie more than a minute to fall into the cadence of movement with such purpose. By the time she did, they covered 2 blocks to the corner and Mom was hailing a cab. At least that was what Mom understood from the large torchbearer light post on the side of the sidewalk, where Mom had pushed a button. She at least hoped it wasn't to cross the street, as that was a wide canal of lapping water and quickly moving boats. Where the cab was going to come from, Millie was not sure. There were layers of vehicles flying above them in rows between the buildings, and layers of giant barges moving under the water in the canal, all in addition to a layer of surface boats leisurely lifting and landing and sinking to join one of the other rows. Within a moment, she was sure she had picked out the thing that would become their cab. It caught her attention because it flickered at the same pace as the signal on the light post. A polished stone, it descended from one of the airborne tracks of vehicles, slowing in an approach and settling into the water with little rocking and no waves. Instead of looking like the fat bird she saw before, this looked like a donut had crashed into a mug of coffee. They stepped into the donut. There was a circle of seats, and both of them took positions in the back. The driver sat in the coffee mug and confirmed their destination. "High Civilization Building?" he asked. "Yes, 12th dock," Mom said. "But could you pass through Harkon on the way? We would like to get a good view of it this morning." "Conducting with your desired route," the driver said. "Please expose your factor to get underway." Mom reached into her bag and pulled out a textbook. She opened it to reveal the cover was a false front and pulled a similarly sized black tablet out of the hole. She put it on the raised table in front of their seats. The screen, which was the entire tablet, blinked to life with a solid chirp and cascading waterfall graphics. "Wow, can I get one of those?" "No." "Can I get a new laptop?" "We'll see." That was the furthest that conversation had ever progressed. Millie considered it a victory and enjoyed the ride. The cab skiffed at water height down the main road before turning onto an even wider canal. Millie could see a mix of buildings lining the road. Some were the milky white teeth, like the one that held the shop on this planet. There were a few that had stacks of wide windows in very elaborate arches. A couple were plainly stone at their base, with glass spires twisting out of them like a sword stuck in a rock. Not their base. At the waterline. While the water looked clear, the actual look of the buildings below only hinted at something more. The driver played an elaborate dance with the boats on this canal until he saw the exit he was looking for and ramped up through higher levels of traffic. Millie felt acceleration push her into the seat, just to the point where exiting becomes uncomfortable, then it stopped. But the speed of the buildings said they were continuing to go faster. It just didn't translate inside the donut. The screen of Mom's tablet on the shared table blinked into a map, with lines of information running along the sides and bottom. The city was an even circle, and they were moving towards its center in a broad curl. They arched high and wide as the buildings thinned out to just the tall ones, until suddenly it was plain what they were circling around. It was the lighthouse, simply the most beautiful and tallest building in the city. The tower was a slender chain of knots rising into the sky, cool and detached from the limits of the city, an exclamation point distant from the edge of the bowl of rock the city sat in, and the great waterfall in the distance. They had exited above most the buildings of Dalla Brateur and entered the lines of traffic above the whole city and surrounding countryside. The building wasn't just the city's heart, it was a beacon to everything around. "So, Millie, that is Harkon. It literally means city tower. The foundation levels were built by the brothers. They were the 4 founders of the city, and they started construction when the rest of the city was just huts and market boats on a bunch of islands in a crater. But they made it to be expanded, and you can see," she pointed at the broad knots, "where it's gained height over the years. That scaffolding at the top is for the next large module. They're raising the beacon to fit in the new levels." Harkon was only slender because it was so tall and they were far away. So thin with rows of vehicles moving past a bunch of levels, it looked like one of those signs pointing direction and distance to places far away, or a very complex telephone pole. It was impossibly taller than any pole or sign, and those horizontal wires moved and connected the building to the rest of the world. At the top was a gem, alternating blue and green, that must be seen from the whole planet. They arced into a stream of traffic that was directly pointed at the building. As they approached, and it consumed the windshield, Millie was awed at the building's expanding mass. It grew from a piece of furniture in a filled room to a whole house. They were moving fast towards it. She could tell from buildings passing on the ground, but it was already the biggest thing she'd ever seen, and they had some distance to go. Now she could really see Harkon's sections separately. Like the new module Mom pointed at, each a thick pile tangled of windows and elevated patios and porches and vents. Above the skyline of already tall towers, they were a chain of town-sized cultured pearls sticking vertical. The barrel-shaped sections bowed out a little, then tapered to a flat top. She counted 4 sections above the skyline of the city, plus the new module, plus the lit beacon that made it a lighthouse. The windows disappeared and open sky shone in the gaps between the sections with lights and the lines of flying cars. Millie gasped quietly. Traffic goes through the building. Yes, it does, Mom said, unable to contain a smile at Millie's excitement. I really like this part. The driver jockeyed to put them on the outside of traffic flow to get a great view. They approached about midway up Harkon. Between the sections, Millie could now see were tinted different colors. Below, the windows had deep orange fins to the sides and shades above, with places where there was no glass holding panels that shimmered in gold. Above, the fins and patterns were violet. Stripes of levels divided into individual windows. Millie could see people working, walking, hanging out on balconies. They passed into the gap between the gold and violet sections. She leaned on the side of the glass window of the cab and looked up and down. Below was an entire sports field, all green and divided by white lines in a diamond pattern. Players ran across, 3 clumps of them, each chasing a ball. In the surrounding bleachers, full of fans were cheering. She looked up. The bottom of the violet section had a glass bottom. It was full of people watching the game, taking pictures, and just enjoying traffic passing by. Whoa, Millie said. And just as quickly, they were out. Millie turned around in her seat and watched Harkon start to shrink, but felt its presence grow in her mind. That is a city, a whole city, just in that one building. Mom laughed a little. It absolutely is. People don't leave it. They don't need to. The world comes to them. The craft switched lanes and levels twice more before ending up at its destination. The cab lighted on a platform well above the streets below. Please collect your belongings, the driver said, and thank you for riding Alter Peter Conveyance today. Thank you for the tour. Well done on getting us a great view. Mom collected her factor tablet. Millie added thanks and a wave, and they went into the building. Dalen was waiting just inside. She inhaled, about to start briefing Mom, and her eyes fell onto Millie. Oh, the day got a lot better now. Millie, you are an absolute surprise to me. This is fantastic. I didn't know either, Millie admitted. A little sheepish, she didn't think to message Dalen once she knew she was coming to Dalla Brateur. Last-minute decisions were made, Mom said, but we interrupted you. Dalen shot Millie a big grin, then re-inhaled to start her briefing as they walked down the hallway. She traded Mom's factor for the larger one she was carrying, putting the smaller one into a hip bag. The new one had panels and a running ticker across the bottom. A calendar, Millie realized. Mom started flicking up some of the squares into side columns. Millie is going to join me for a couple of today's events. She doesn't need to be in the morning meetings. So, Dalen, would you take her over to Ton's and get her ready for the afternoon? Absolutely, Dalen said, sounding more than pleased. Millie didn't know what tons was, but Dalen's excitement shot Millie's anticipation to Harkon-level heights. Mom poked the tablet. Okay, they know you're coming. Then you both will be having lunch with us. She poked the tablet face, then scowled. They say they don't have an extra chair. Call them and let them know they have an extra chair. Dalen made a note on her own black tablet that was attached to the gauntlet on her forearm. From the way it was said, Millie was sure they would find her a seat. Mom continued, She can join us for the early afternoon meeting. Then we will go to class. That should be the day. Anything else you know? What would you like for her at Ton's? Mom did the size up, tilting her head once each way to get a good view of Millie. Then she did the same to Dalen, which was very weird. Millie never saw Mom size up anyone besides Millie or Dad before he said something stupid. I trust you completely, Dalen. Dress her to fit in the meetings and the class. Not more than an inch off the hair. Credits are on your factor. From the height of Mom's office, it was possible to see the city cliffs. The lighthouse still rose far above, but not too many other buildings were this height. They left by elevator and descended to the lobby about halfway down. The middle of the building opened to a wide bridge running into open air across the big boulevard before getting absorbed by the Sentinel towers across the street. Millie looked down at layers of traffic. She saw the lights sparking arrows moving commuters through the air, the wide boats running like a flotilla of leaves in the middle to the waterway, and the heavy silver fish carrying freight at the bottom of the canals. Following, outlining, crossing, and flowing around all of them were layers of people walking the knitted walkways and weaving through traffic, buildings, and sky. The bridge, too, was a layer woven into people and movement, crossing the canal and deepening into its own building on the other side. Once there, the bridge became its own street, enclosed by the tall buildings. The city floor below forgotten. The operation of the city curled upon itself, climbed to this new tier, and settled extra levels to fill every available place with life and activity. Ton's blue glass facade wedged between two white buildings, blooming in the higher stories to a wide flower edged in multicolored and constantly changing lights as the neighbors tapered to boring spires. From the moment they walked in, Millie felt pampered. The staff brought them drinks, and they reclined on a couch as clothing was brought to them. Dalen decided that the only thing Millie needed to fit in were a jacket and a haircut. I know it's your school uniform, but that's what people are wearing here these days. Dalen pointed to her own blouse and plaid skirt with leggings underneath. Her plaid didn't have straight lines, more a twisted recreation of 12-sided space-time, but it was very comparable. After some time knowing the shop, I can say fashion on different planets converges in weird ways. Like crabs. Earth keeps evolving crabs. Describe one to me, Dalen asked. Hard-shelled seafood, claws, mini legs that go sideways. Really tasty. Oh yeah. Something similar evolved a bunch of times here too. They're called purton. Millie said the word in a whisper. Purton. The image that the persistence engine put in Millie's head was very crab-like, but massive. How big are they? I'm glad they're farmed now. They picked out a jacket that highlighted the right parts of Millie's skirt, similar to the one Dalen wore that took her Matrix program skirt and added Euclidean geometry. Dalen was careful to pick out a style that she said would work with her school's dress code. It was code for the jacket wasn't weird future material not found on Earth. Dalen hadn't realized it, but Mom had set up a hair appointment for her at the same time. It would not have been possible to scrub the grin off of Dalen's face, so they sat next to each other while competing hairstylists worked them over. Millie's stylist was Sanov, a wisp-thin man with hair, complexion, and clothes coordinated shades of pearl. He looked like a kite string stood on end, and Millie worried about his safety near scissors. Dalen's stylist was a friend of hers named Alatrue, who seemed to enjoy pockets as much as piling her thick curls towards the sky. "Changing your augments today, Hon?" Alatrue asked Dalen. "I love the emoticolor and want to keep it, but it's getting messy. Could you clean up the levels?" "What's emoticolor?" Millie asked. "It's easier if I show you." Dalen thought for a second and made herself blush. The ends of Dalen's hair went from platinum white to burning red. "Whoa," Millie said. "Can I?" "I think you need something to look forward to when you come back." Sanov returned to Millie's side and asked what the order of the day would be. Dalen spoke up. "A light trim and cleanup." Dalen thought for a second and winked at Millie. "Plus a clear coat and set it to this ring." She took off one of her pieces of jewelry, and Sanov set it on a velvet pad on his bench. For the better part of an hour, they talked while the stylists did their thing. Dalen's hair went through the rainbow as Alatrue worked a factor nearby, playing with controls. She gave Dalen a warning of, "Be patient," a second before Dalen's shoulder-length hair frizzed up and striped sickly green and orange. The shock that ran over Dalen's face brought tears to Millie's eyes. It only lasted another second before the hair settled down with sharp definitions between the stripes of color, this time bright pink and a feisty orange. Alatrue punched a last command into the tablet. Dalen's hair blazed white before settling down. A last flicker of pink and orange crept up the sides, then slowly drained as Dalen's embarrassment and shock also drained. Alatrue was finished. Sanov was much more methodical, moving around Millie as a coil on all sides at the same time. It was a controlled fury, a bashful storm of snipping and efficiency. When Sanov was done, he stood back, inhaled deeply, and let out slowly. "Complete," he said. For someone with such an insignificant mass, Millie was unsure how he projected a voice with such force that it rattled her fingernails. Her hair, alas, was much less forceful. Besides a few less stragglers, Millie's hair looked the same. She shot a sideways glance at Dalen. "Millie has not had clear coat before. Could you go through the protocol?" "Absolutely," Sanov admitted. He handed Millie the ring off the bench. "Put it on." Millie did as instructed. "Turn the gem to the desired color. Then rub the hand with the ring over the portion you would like emphasized with color." He said the word emphasized as an entire sentence itself. To illustrate the suggested motion, Sanov moved his hand around his head in a sequence that looked like yoga, tying shoes, and a knife fight between snakes. Millie looked at the ring. It was a thin silver band and a setting with a white-gray stone that was a little narrower than her finger. She turned the round setting and saw the color of the stone change, darken to black, then brighten through purples, blues, reds, oranges until its yellow merged to white again. Millie rotated to a vibrant red and ran her hand across the right side of her head. A streak of hair changed to match the ring, almost unzipping the dark brown shades she'd lived with to reveal a new, vibrant Millie. "Red is not yours," Sanoff disapproved. "Try the violet to match your eyes." Lunch was opulent. The restaurant was open air and nestled among the ring of trees that inhabited the top story of a block gray building. The trees were perfectly lollipops, thin trunks leading to groomed spheres of leaves. The pagoda at the center looked like a top hat, even being perfectly round. They were dozens of stories above water level. Mom instantly liked the jacket, the haircut, even the clear coat coloring. She did ask why they hadn't purchased more. "She's not that far from style," Dalen defended. "Law of converging pants." Mom nodded at that. She handed Millie her small tablet, the factor from the cab, and they were led to a table. 5 severe black suits were already seated. They stood when Mom approached, each putting out a hand in turn from left to right. Mom put her hands on both sides of each in turn, and that lunch partner gave a little bow. Dalen and Millie flanked Mom on each side, each introduced as assistants who were fully bonded. A seat had indeed been found for Millie. What looked like suits were black one-piece jumpers with cinched waists, studded cuffs, and a wide gap between the lapels that showed a collared white shirt underneath. Each had their collar closed with a jet black pin. Millie noted that the pin increased in size in the same order that Mom shook hands. The last partner sported a neck pin the size of a coffee cup lid. Mom had offered Millie a few instructions on the meeting beyond standard rules. First, this was the partnership of partnering partners who were seeking some business with the bank. Second, they had a very specific protocol and wouldn't be talking directly to assistants. It wasn't an insult, but a way to keep meetings moving briskly. Third, Dalen would be taking meeting notes, and Millie was to take notes on what Dalen was doing. For Dalen, this was her literal job. For Millie, the whole idea was kind of new. She liked trying to understand Dalen and was very happy to rely on someone as a filter with this mysterious partnership. Mom talked business with the partners, or specifically talked business with the partner with the big neck stone. He was the only speaker, and the rest appeared to be doing the same note-taking sequence Dalen and Millie were engaged, just extended 2 more steps. From what she gathered, the partners were trying to convince Mom that the bank should purchase something. Mom did not reveal her own thoughts on the matter, instead asking very specific questions about bioquantum derivative value and the long-term freight projection. When the first of the food arrived, they were still discussing alternative risk allotment for third-generation liens. Each place setting was laid with a small spoon and a plate that looked like a ski slope. At each corner of the wiggling track was a vibrantly colored flower. 8 wait staff delivered to the 8 people at the table simultaneously an iridescent blue egg placed at the top of the ski slope. Millie took the hint that she wasn't supposed to do anything before Mom and the lead partner, who both took their spoons and struck the top of the ski eggs. Butterflies emerged from each of the shells, flew up a couple beats, then disappeared into a puff of smoke. Once Mom and the lead partner were done, the other partners cracked theirs in sequence. The cracks and the butterflies emerged in different colors. Millie paused while Dalen cracked hers. Then Millie took her turn, with only slightly too loud of a wallop, at the same time as the last partner, whose silence broke with a slight giggle. She wasn't totally sure that she did the right order until she got an approving pat on the knee under the table from Mom. Once her egg was cracked and a butterfly evaporated, Millie watched the oozy contents of the shell slide down the winding ski slope track, soaking each of the flowers in turn. She might have gotten the order right, but now her worry was that she had to eat a raw egg. She understood Mom's invoking the standard rule to try everything. No wasties, no facies. It was not a mistake. It was also not an egg. The fall's fluid tasted like lemony candy, and each of the flowers was a new type of green flavor that opened broadly with the sour sweetness. The tastes were reassuring and experimental, tied together and set adrift in a babbling mountain stream. Millie was not sure how lunch salad could be made better. The second course came as Mom and the lead partner and the second partner were talking about exposure of firms and their shared colleagues who recommended this restaurant. The staff put a broad stone platter in the center of the table for all to share. It was a large chicken or roast bird of some sort with 100 little sticks poking out to make it look like a porcupine. Each person had a plate of little sauce cups before them. The diners pulled each stick and took the meat that came with it, dipping in the sauces, then eating. The third partner pulled the last stick, but offered it to the fourth partner, who ate it and let out a raucous belch. Everyone at the table applauded. The third course found Mom laughing at the junior partner's joke, which involved a magician, a thimble, and the 12 pounds of horse meat. The waitstaff called their attention to one of the lollipop trees that had produced an apple-sized fruit. A chef came out from the back and turned it into a pie at the table side, while the waitstaff told the story of the fruit. We have these cultivars of ular, specifically bred to balance the sweet salad, the fatty chicken. It is to quench the hunger and the pangs of digestion and the ennui of modern life. He went on as the chef distributed each slice, airborne to waiting plates. Everyone applauded at that, too. The fruit pie was something between a sweet grape and a really spicy pepper. The taste dried Millie's mouth and then lit it on fire. She could feel a sweep of sweat under her chin before looking at Dalen for aid. Dalen had the sweats too, but had broken off the edge of the crust and was eating that. Millie followed the lead and found the crust strangely quenched to the inferno. Together, the pie capped an amazing lunch. Not so amazing as the reaction from the partners. Well before they got up to leave, the partners' protocol collapsed into more laughing, belching, and pinching one another. Millie had not gotten one bit of inkling that Mom had agreed to partner with them about anything, but she did have a standing invitation to their offices, happy hours, a winter cabin, and at least one wedding. The third partner hugged Mom on the way out. As the partners left, Mom motioned for Dalen and Millie to sit back down and ordered herself a hot tea. She offered a chance to Dalen and Millie, who agreed. The restaurant was clearing of eaters, and the staff welcomed them to stick around. So what did you see? Mom asked, as she took out her own factor tablet. Dalen nodded to Millie to start. I saw... Millie replayed the beginning in her head with the severe motions and very specific order. She laid it over the image of the happy troupe she saw leave the restaurant. I watched Dalen flipping through her order of notes on the tablet. It happened as their strict protocol broke down over lunch. I saw that they were asking you for something, but the questions you asked made them comfortable with you? Dalen had lots of tables open with titles of the questions you were asking. I do not think that you'll be purchasing what they were trying to sell you, but they were okay with that by the end. Very observant. We will not be purchasing from them. They're a criminal syndicate. This was not the answer Millie expected. It was very much not what Dalen expected, and the official assistant got very flustered very quickly. Her hair tinted the slightest blue, which was kind of amazing to note after an entire and very intense lunch hadn't warranted the slightest color change. I have all their references and background research, Dalen worried. Nothing illegal showed up. Mom emitted a calm voice. It would not have shown up anywhere. It's not even in the gaps. Their giveaway is nothing spectacular, nothing weird, just a little too much of a good thing in the wrong places. What you didn't see is the main talker with the big jewel was not the decision maker. He was just an insulator for one of the others, who in this group I believe was number 3. They run their business in the same shell system. You can crack open 4 of the nuts to show perfect legitimacy, but it's the 5th one inside the 5th one that they're trying to hide money for. Millie was kind of upset by this. We let a couple mobsters buy us lunch? No, we pay our own way at these meetings. Bank policy. That made Millie feel absolutely no better. What exactly do you do, Mrs. Salmon, if that is indeed your real name? Mom enjoyed the joke, but didn't let on anything else. Dalen tried to calm down with a sip of tea, almost shot the drink through her nose. The tips of her hair went a little orange. Back in the bank tower, the next meeting was kind of the reverse of Dad's visit to Homie in the walking city of Harlquat. But it was Mom accepting the guest. Dalen and Millie were inside chairs in Mom's main office, again introduced as assistants to Frit Legend, the lead bookkeeper of an operation called Conat Ventures. Millie noticed the man's large, tree-root gnarled hands before anything else. They stood out on his slim figure in a tailored suit and did not match the well-styled hair and beard around his dark face. Frit Legend brought a number of portfolios. Mom reviewed the contents as he readied his presentation on her whole wall-sized monitor. Millie didn't want just a laptop anymore. Mom finished her reading. Tall Frit, you are asking for a substantial support from Primitat Bank, and that is why you have been asked to see me. This is not something to cause concern, but relief. Many people with this kind of request do not get this far. That is reassuring to hear, Dr. Salvia. I appreciate you seeing me and taking my proposal seriously. Go ahead and enter the squadron, Mom offered. Millie almost giggled. It was such a nonsense phrase for Mom to say. The words elevator pitch tried to print in her brain, but she didn't know what that was either. The silent translation settled on book report. That was very easy for Frit Legend. As he started talking about a service connecting this city of Dalla Brateur to other places on the planet, his projector floated an image of the Harkon with its passing traffic zooming out to the globe. When Frit Legend talked about a new kind of travel beyond the standard vehicles used today, His projection dissolved images of the fat pigeon cars and donut taxis into this new kind of vehicle. His words took to the air lofty ambitions about flight and movement and comfort and luxury and connection and adventure and place and feeling, all backed up by images of trees and people and hair flapping and people resting on each other with glasses of wine. Then he brought it back to the ground. People would pay for this, he said, because this has always been their dream, to add meaning to everything they did. The push for velocity took away meaning, and he would give it back. The projection switched to a spinning logo, sort of the letter S slammed into a K with an arrow moving through it. It was a very good presentation. Mom read right through it. "Why did you come to this bank?" she asked. "Because the security it represents, the deep history of supporting good businesses, and the strong name." "And your prior presentations to the Bank of Gresht and Otho Financing Corporation got turned down." Mom asked a question with a statement. Legend did not fully expect that response, and you could hear a crumbling sound in the beautiful world he was trying to create. But the crumbling stopped after a second with little outward sign on his expression. Figuring that this bank had a larger grasp of the situation than he anticipated, he replied truthfully. "That is correct," he replied, without excuse or apology. "Why did they deny you financing?" Still betting the truth was helping, he replied, "I turned them down. The forms and reports they were demanding. They were attempting to squeeze this concept into a transport formula, and it needs to be considered an entertainment and luxury for the numbers to work." "But it is transport. You are taking people places." Frit Legend seemed to get the point that these questions were uncomfortable, but they were benefiting his cause. "Yes, we are moving people. Unfortunately, paying for transport projects is broken. It scrapes every part of the operation down to the bone and does not leave anything left for making sure getting places is enjoyable." Mom stopped and took some notes. Then she looked at Frit Legend again. "Tall Frit, if we do business, there are going to be controls on how the bank's money is spent, and there will be strict constraints on how this project evolves." "Will they be transportation constraints or entertainment constraints?" "Neither. We have some folks in our research department that will be working with you to come up with a new formula, a new format to work under. I am looking over your numbers, and I see that there is nothing outlandish or weird here. Everything adds up without magic or tricks. But it does not work if it's squeezed into our assumptions." She tapped on his number sheets and charts with a pen. "You did an extremely thorough job, probably more than anyone else has done applying for a fairly simple loan. It adds correctly, and it shows that we would be foolish not to work with you." That was not what Frit Legend expected to hear. Millie spotted a real change in his expression, one that revealed he had not been praised in quite this way before. He let out a deeply appreciative, "Thank you." "Now," Mom continued, typing a few more keystrokes into her factor, "your money is in line. You'll be working with Tal Lalad and his office on the 20th floor. They will move your business plan forward with complete authority to establish realistic goals in line with your specific kind of business and release money as you hit those goals. You will make reports to shareholders every other month, and those shareholders are me." Just you? Just me. How much money? Enough to do business correctly, a lot more than you asked for. The color Frit Legend turned could not be fully described because so many things that turn people colors were going on at the same time. He was unable to breathe and having a heart attack, but had never felt so vital and alive. He blushed, branched, reddened, jaundiced, overheated, and died a little simultaneously. To his credit, he was able to stand and raise his hand, saying, "Thank you, Dr. Salvia." "Thank you for joining us today, Tal Frit. Can you find your way to the elevators and the 20th floor?" "I am going to try." As Frit Legend left the office, Mom took a minute to wrap up her notes before Dalen informed her that Bern Ganonish had some shop business to attend to. Mom buzzed him in from the lobby. "Tal Bern, how is life treating you today?" "The clouds drift by and the rain is short. Thank you for asking." He handed a sheet to Mom. She scanned it from top to bottom, then let out a word that Millie didn't fully get the translation. It was a word she had never heard before, one of deep belonging to this world, carrying an image of sultry, illegal hip-wiggling covered in mud. It sounded longer, but the comparison that popped into her head was 4 letters, all in caps, and put into question the spiritual cleanliness of the user and the air around them. "This has to be a joke," Mom asked at Bern Ganonish. "No," Ganonish said. "That is indeed the power bill for the shop. I triple-checked this side monitors." "The power company doesn't let you know that something like this is coming?" Ganonish shrugged. Dalen injected, "Well, why would they? They're going to make money off this. Why should they let you know you're going to owe them a lot of money before you owe them a lot of money?" Ganonish was thinking the same thing, but asked a more focused, "Do we have any idea what is the cause of this draw?" Mom thought for a minute. "We know something is going differently, but only that the engine was running hot." Dalen handed her a factor pulled up with past bills. Mom flipped through them. "This increase, it's looking like a pretty sharp curve." "Does it give you an idea?" Dalen asked. "Yes, but I'd want to talk with Jules about it first. He's working on something, and this might put it over the edge." Bern Ganonish waited another second, then said, "If the professor needs any further information or finds anything in his research, please do not hesitate to let me know." A short pause while Mom kept looking at the pages and the tablet. "But you will be releasing the funds for this expense?" Mom shook her head, but only at the numbers. To Bern Ganonish, she said, "Absolutely. Thank you for getting this here so quickly and for all your help." She excused Tal Bern, wishing him a good weekend. Millie had a question. "They know Dad?" "Everyone knows Dad. But your dad gave up this part of the work a long time ago. He had more important concerns." She smiled at Millie, then turned her attention back to the numbers. "Not to mention your father makes things unmentionably complex. He throws out functional answers to replace them with extra crazy. He might have just plugged his pressure cooker into the persistence engine, just because he likes the crazy." Dalen used her assistant powers to prod Mom to the next task before she got too bogged down in thinking hard about these anomalies. They packed up their bags, moved out to the door. From the 138th floor, they elevated to the 12th dock, where they landed this morning. Dalen cornered a company shuttle to the university. Where Dalla Brateur was a jewel held in the hands of the dark city cliffs, Brothers University was a verdant jungle placed in a glass vase in the middle of the city. Its track of green vines and hanging jungle ivy twisted a spiral around the primary minaret, and the side buildings connected outwards. The wall of the school started as a square, but had been overlaid with other squares, slightly off. This continued until the whole perimeter was one of the most perfect circles ever constructed, something never to be admitted by either the philosophy or the math departments. Vehicles stopped on the outside edge of the university wall, and the three-dimensional flow of people took over inside. "This is gorgeous," Millie whispered. "You don't want to go here," Dalen said. "The education is substandard and the sports teams are awful." Dalen is just jealous that her borked Star Cruiser Academy couldn't get past the first round of the biannual Lagtheron tournament. "Should I ask what Lagtheron is?" Mom stopped walking for a second. "No, you probably shouldn't," she said, and started walking again. "I'll send you a video," Dalen whispered. Regardless of whatever the sport was, Millie liked the idea of more notes from Dalen. They worked their way towards the primary tower, then drifted down a couple stories. The bridge they rode connected at a tall, narrow arch in the building, and the moving sidewalk deposited them to a grand, shiny steel lobby. Dalen led through the crowd until Mom got caught by a student asking her a question. Others quickly congealed until Mom's internal clock kicked in. That is, Dalen put up a finger and got her attention. "Good questions all. Let's make a note to answer yours, tall heck." She pointed to a red-headed student. "And yours, tall fence," pointing to a student in a green beret. Dalen added these to her factor. Then Mom spoke louder, almost playfully. "But time is short, people. Get moving." Mom smiled at the students, rushing towards the lecture hall, but clearing out to make their walk a lot easier. The lecture hall was immense, almost too big to fit in the huge tower. The flat, circular roof was held up on the outside by a pattern of circles and triangles that looked like a punched-out accordion. Row and row of seats angled up and away into the distance. The number of students made the stage look like an afterthought, and Millie got stage fright on Mom's behalf. Mom was not feeling such pressure at all. She was talking to a couple students at the front row who were trying to get a last question in before the lecture. Mom noted each of their thoughts to come back to later. Dalen took Mom's factor out of the bag and set it on the lectern. On the two large panels behind the podium, one repeated the screen from the tablet. The other showed Dalen at the microphone. Students took out factors of various shapes and sizes, each blinking on, flipping through screens, and settling on the lecture feed. Millie and Dalen took seats to one side and a couple rows back. Mom took the lectern. Millie was fascinated to meet this new person who was lecturing this immense hall of students. This person had the look that cut through unnecessary or misshapen thoughts. Millie had been on the receiving end of that look enough to know it belonged to Mom. This person had the voice of authority. Mom had seen that at work, cutting through federal agents at the park pond like one stony salmon. This person came forth with drawing questions and probing for truth. Millie had seen that today, performed by Dr. Salvia with the partners and Frit Legend. However, this person on stage had a depth of knowledge that Millie had never witnessed. Millie looked over Dalen's arm at the outline for the class and the slides that were being flashed on the screen. They worked through the big numbers and into smaller topics, marching down the outline like stairs out of a big downtown library. This was a math class inside a history class, wrapped in a physics class, all the while pumped full of business psychology, but it never felt like a hike. There was more information in the subtopics than Millie had gotten to an entire semester at school. This professor was working methodically, clearly, and completely through them, considering the shape of these topics and showing the rapt class all of the different ways to get there. There was an appreciation that the class showed by following along and asking questions. Students were recognized and stood to ask, and this lecturer answered and asked different ones back. The students took a moment before responding, just like Mom would. The lecturer let them, never ridiculing, but always probing. Millie understood most of the words, but only about a third the very large concepts. She understood about none of the very small concepts. The class was longer than any at school, but it felt like it went by in a whip crack. The room thundered as the body of students rose to leave. Then it was quickly hushed. A few students lingered for a moment of extra questions. Each was answered. Back outside the university, they took to a launch pad. Dalen hugged Millie and said goodbye before taking a separate shuttle to her house. Mom and Millie took the ramps down and emptied out of the lobby and into the grand student plaza at the foot of the university's tower. The paths of people moving across the open space formed highways that they were not ready to join. They stood for a moment, absorbing all the frenetic energy and letting their bodies run off the outside power source. The throbbing wakes of all the moving people was enough to set a cadence to their heartbeats. Millie's mind floated free for a minute, singular intelligence detached from the living city around her and observing people on their paths and projects and circular activities of Dalla Brateur. "Mom," Millie asked. "Yes, Millie." "What is a Dr. Salvia?" she asked, although she already had some idea of the answer. "Well, you know very well what a doctor is, somebody that went to school too long. And there is Salvia, which is the last name of someone from a particular region on a particular planet. That was a tag that I needed to carry around, continue to carry around for certain purposes. For your information, this is a region that you do not need to have any connection." It pulled Millie back. She took a deep breath and sighed it out. "You're not from Earth, are you, Mom?" Stoney thought for a second and decided against parsing her daughter's question for too deep a meaning. She decided to answer straight. "Today, I'm from Earth. That hasn't always been the case, and it may not be the case forever. But today's been really good, even if I wasn't quite on Earth. So I'm okay with that." Millie wasn't sure what she wanted to hear, but that wasn't it. However, she heard honesty in the answer. There were layers of meaning in the words, but no lies, and that was comforting. "I'm okay with that too," Millie said. For the first time in a long time, she took Mom's hand unprompted. Together, they started their very long journey home. This was Millie Salmon and the Infinite Shop, Chapter 16, Mom at Work. In the next episode, we start tracking down that energy drain in the shop. Thank you for listening. You can find more about Millie at milliesalmon.com or join us on Patreon. Please like, subscribe, and leave a review on whichever podcast app you use. Millie Salmon and the Infinite Shop is a production of Infinite Shop Limited, which you can follow on all social media platforms. I'm Ray Dubicki. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to reading some more for you soon.